In spite of my attempts to defend the previous Transformers movie, Revenge of the Fallen, the film, is undeniably terrible. Not exactly biting original commentary or a searing hot take, exactly. Nearly every internet personality out there has taken a shot at it or used it as a point of reference for something else bad they're talking about. I remember enjoying the film just fine when I saw it in theaters because it tried to include little references to Transformers to give it this sense of authority to the fans, like they actually respected the source material that they're adapting. Like banter between Megatron and Starscream, name dropping an obscure comic character here or there, or having Optimus and Jetfire combine like their Power Links mode from the Unicron trilogy. But as the series went on, they would continue to do this and just name drop these little references or these pieces of iconography to remind us of the source material, but none of that really means anything. None of it adds any real content to these movies, and they just end up being the same awful 2.5 hour garbage bogged down by the awful human characters. But would you believe me if I said that the video game adaptation of Revenge of the Fallen is not only good, it's better than it has any right to be. It's not the best Transformers licensed game. The Armada game, as well as some games we're going to be talking about later in the series, are still better, but it's undoubtedly the best game set in the Bayverse of movies. Revenge of the Fallen, the game, has all the same ports that the first movie's game did. The main version being for the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC was developed by a studio called Luxaflux, a very small studio who is owned by the company whom, at this point, had the video game licensing contract from Hasbro, Activision. The studio only released a small handful of games, most of which were pretty well received, such as True Crime: The Streets of LA and its sequel, and the video game adaptations of Shrek 2 and Kung Fu Panda. Unfortunately, Revenge of the Fallen would be the last game they would develop, as Activision would dissolve the studio in 2010. The PS2 and Wii versions are an entirely separate type of game developed by Chrome Studios, and just like the first game, the DS versions are done by shovelware developer Vicarious Visions, and the PSP version by Savage Entertainment. Interestingly enough, the composer for the film score would actually lend some original music for this game. Once again, this game has two separate campaigns for the Autobots and Decepticons. The Autobots have teamed up with a human military organization called Nest to hunt down the rest of the remaining Decepticons. This ties into the mission structure as well, as you have to select a location around the world to deploy to and complete certain missions there, with a variety of characters usually to choose from, unless the game makes you choose only a specific one. You unlock new areas by acquiring campaign points and completing missions. This gives the game a bit of a non-linear angle, since you're not forced to follow a preset mission order like in the first game, or many other games for that matter. Occasionally, these missions will intersect the actual events of the film, especially later in the game that you get. The Decepticon campaign is largely the same, but mirrored. There's an identical version of a mission from the Autobot campaign on the Decepticon one somewhere, but it might be placed in a different mission hub, or while as a different equivalent character. Weapons and character abilities are switched around as well, giving the Decepticon campaign a distinct feeling while not actually having many new or unique assets or mission objectives. This was probably the best approach they could have gone for when adapting Revenge of the Fallen into a video game. Most of Revenge of the Fallen's screen time is unadaptable and useless, but lots of movie-based games struggle with this. A big summer blockbuster movie may only have about 3 or 4 big action set pieces that you can actually design a level around for a video game. So that often results in a game that's either laughably short in the case of a lot of those data design interactive games released in PAL formats, or you have them add a lot of new content into the game not seen in the film to pad out the runtime, similar to, let's say, the Lord of the Rings Two Towers game. Another alternative, if you are adapting the second or third film in a trilogy into a video game, is you can combine the films together to use multiple set pieces from throughout the trilogy, such as what happened with the Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End game. But this approach really kind of gives the game an identity of its own, which is great. And when you combine that with an actually fun and entertaining gameplay loop, it really does set this game apart from other movie adaptations. It doesn't really follow the story of the movie at all necessarily. There's a lot of scenes with the characters bantering back and forth between missions talking about the state of the war, but we don't get bogged down by any of the human characters' interactions or even the subplot of Optimus dying or anything like that. Most of that is completely absent from the game.
Although they reuse a lot of sound effects from the Traveler's Tales game, the overall sound design for this game is leagues above that one. Excellent OST, great weapon sounds, and actual in-game voices. Enemies actually speak, and you can hear their voices around you in stereo as they react to what you're doing and which character you're playing as.
The Allspark has been destroyed, and still the Decepticons return.
Do not relent. His systems are close to failure.
While we're talking about audio, I learned something very funny about the previous game after finishing the video about it. Apparently, the ADR director for the game is none other than Carl Weathers, Apollo Creed from the Rocky movies? I don't know if this is true or someone just messing with his wiki pages or his IMDb, but it's the only piece of media he's credited as the voice director, and it's definitely a head-scratcher. What they've done with the gameplay is unlike any other Transformers game in the series. The game borrows from shooters significantly more than the previous game did, and ranged weapons are your primary means of dealing damage compared to how in the previous game they were barely used at all. Movement speed is pretty fast depending on the character, and gone is the shaking camera from merely walking forwards. You can still jump and climb buildings, and you have a simple melee attack combo. What's interesting here is how the alt mode is implemented. When you're not in aiming mode and you hold down the right trigger, you enter your alt mode. As soon as you release the button, you'll transform back. You can press one of the 4 face buttons before you transform out of your alt mode to perform a specific move. You can do a boost jump by holding X, a melee takedown by holding square, and a ground pound by holding circle. This control scheme is quite unique and has a bit of a learning curve to it. But once you master it, it can become incredibly rewarding and satisfying. You can chain these transformation jumps to each other to cross building rooftops like you're Spider-Man or something. The melee takedown becomes your primary means of dealing with enemies at close range because it's so effective. Each character has 2 ranged weapons you can swap between with the R1 button, but the rapid-fire hit scan weapon that Bumblebee and Ratchet have outclass most other weapons in consistent DPS. Ironhide's cannons are nice too, even if his other weapon is this close-range shotgun that isn't very effective a lot of times. Prime's weapons have consistent damage and range, but his cannon weapon does feel a bit underpowered, if not charged up, which can cost you some time to do. The last Autobot who is playable is Breakaway. A strange inclusion in this game for sure, as he's the designated airborne character and the only Autobot with a sniper rifle. He's a bit clunky to control, and his transformation melee attack is awkward and hard to tell if you've actually hit anything with it. On the Decepticon side, we have Long Haul, who for some reason is not one of the Constructicons here. He's the Ironhide mirror and has a flamethrower weapon that, as you can imagine, is laughably ineffective at long range, but kills enemies almost instantly up close. Next is Sideways, and it is criminal that you're not able to play as him more throughout the Decepticon campaign. He's just like Bumblebee if he had a sniper rifle. He's a much faster and more nimble sniper than Breakaway. Next is, Grindor? Remember when we just used to call him the Blackout clone when the movie first came out? Yeah, this was just a huge head-scratcher when the movie first came out. Maybe it was for the sake of recycling 3D assets to make it easier on the animators, but the continuity in these movies is just terrible. Did they not think anyone would be like, hey, isn't that the helicopter guy that got killed in the first movie? I always thought Sideways' design was lazy too. Barricade was already a loose end from the first movie, and now you have this guy who transforms into an Audi R8 that has the exact same head sculpt as him. Anyway, tangent aside, Grindor plays fine. He's a bit clunky to control, and the altitude of the helicopter mode is a little bit difficult to get the hang of. Starscream controls like a better breakaway. He's quicker on his feet and has a more versatile array of weapons. Due to the non-linear nature of this game's campaign, in addition to some missions being repeats on each campaign, I can't really do a moment-to-moment breakdown of everything that happens. So instead I'll have to give a simple overview of the majority of the different mission hubs and the different objectives they contain. Between each mission you'll have an opportunity to upgrade some of the inherent traits of your characters. Luckily these upgrades apply to the entire team and not a single character at a time. The progression system is harmless and doesn't really add much to the game, but doesn't make it artificially more grindy either. There are a few stats such as weapon cooldown and weapon overheat that are always going to make your character stronger due to the reliance on ranged weapons. Some upgrades are just frankly useless, however. Like, how often are you going to need to upgrade your charged melee attack where you just badly need that upgrade?
The first Autobot mission is in Shanghai, just how the movie began. We're here to hunt down Sideways, but other Decepticons could be hiding here as well. We take Ironhide into the fight, and we just have to defeat a group of 12 enemies, which is the simple and honest fun that makes this game's best moments. Next is the Sideways boss fight, which is pretty easy, but can be time-consuming as he leads you around the city. He knows that he's faster but weaker than you are, and will often try to just simply run away, so you'll need to do your best to chase him down while blasting him in your alt mode. Next we deploy Ratchet, which is the first time he's been playable in a Bayverse game so far. We need to get Ironhide out of trouble and escort him to safety. Go figure they would assign such a task to the medic character. In spite of that role, he's one of the most fun and balanced characters to play as. The massive rolling Demolisher shows up soon afterwards, so Optimus steps in to take on this powerful foe. The boss fight isn't too difficult. Demolisher will shoot a barrage of missiles at you, which can be easily dodged by either exiting aiming mode and jumping to the left or right, or your character can also do a dodge roll with the analog stick while aiming that does the trick too. There's also an overdrive gauge that can be used once it's full to deal massive damage, but unfortunately we didn't play enough Blitzball, so we can't deal 1,000,000 damage with attack reels or whatever. The same mission hub on the Decepticon campaign has missions with Sideways and Long Haul, and includes an escort mission where Sideways has to escort Grindor to safety. There's a mission on the Autobot campaign where you have to activate a bunch of communications beacons one at a time, with a group of enemies guarding each one, and then that same mission on the Decepticon campaign has you playing as Grindor destroying each of the relays one at a time. There's a mission back in California that has the Autobots trying to rescue Michaela and a bunch of construction workers from the Decepticons. And that same mission on the Decepticon campaign has you taking these same humans hostage for interrogation. In the film, the Constructicons sneak aboard a cargo ship, and once they're out into the ocean, they use a piece of the Allspark to resurrect Megatron. Ignoring all the obvious plot holes and leaps in logic that allow that to be possible, in the game, there's a Navy fleet protecting Megatron's burial site at all times, so a battle begins to clear out the fleet and gain access to him. On the Autobot campaign, you take control of Breakaway to protect the fleet and restore the ship's anti-air guns, and on the Decepticon side, you take control of Starscream to destroy them. This mission definitely highlights how slow and unwieldy Breakaway is. Grindor has the same problem of being too slow, and his weapons overheat before he's able to defeat a lot of enemies once he's surrounded. Now that Megatron is back, we finally get to play as him, and overall he's fine. Not quite as overpowered as he was in the first game, but that's for the better. He has a rapid-fire plasma cannon, which is not a hit-scan weapon for a change, and then he has his fusion cannon, which works more like a precision weapon in this game. The only major problem with him is when you want to use the tank cannon in his alt mode, it's very hard to hit enemies directly in front of you unless you're facing directly dead center of the camera, which can get really irritating. This mission where you finally get to play as him inevitably leads to a fight with Optimus, and I am so grateful that this game has honest-to-God boss fights that don't hold your hand or force you into a scripted sequence. No Prime randomly running away forcing you to find him within a time limit like in the first game. The same mission on the Autobot campaign has you play as Bumblebee and taking down Grindor, who can be pretty tough, especially because the shockwave from his secondary weapon can be difficult to dodge and get out of the way of. Once we break Jetfire out of the museum, it's time for the Egypt level. The first part of it has Optimus fighting off both Starscream and Megatron at the same time, which can be quite challenging but feels appropriate. The Decepticon one has Megatron taking on both Jetfire and Bumblebee, which is definitely by far the hardest part of the Decepticon campaign.
Megatron decides he doesn't want to play second fiddle to the Fallen and turns on him to take his rightful place once again, and the final boss begins. The Autobot version plays out just like in the film, with Prime and Jetfire performing a Power Links move and taking on the Fallen, but from there, both versions of the final boss fight are the same. I promise this campaign is a lot more fun to play through than it is to talk about. I kept it brief here because the game does lack variety and originality in its mission structure and objectives, but makes up for it with the really fun moment-to-moment gameplay, and I feel like overall it makes for an experience head and shoulders above the first game, but also most movie-based games from the era. I really hope the former Luxaflux developers are doing well and having prosperous careers with wherever they went after Activision shut down the studio.
Alright, I gotta peel back the curtain a little bit here, and this is completely unscripted. So, after I finished the review of the first movie game, which I, again, only got a PS3 copy of because I needed to record footage via HDMI to not have what happened to the footage for the Armada game. So, I buy a PS3 copy of that, finish that review, move on to the Revenge of the Fallen game, set up my Xbox 360 to record it, and I own two Xbox 360s. I have the 2007 Halo 3 Collector's Edition 1, and a 2009 bog standard white one that I had gotten for my birthday that year. My original Xbox 360 I've had since then. And the Halo 3 one had infamously red ringed. So it's been a brick for a while. I go to turn on the white one, the standard white one, to record footage of this game, and it had also red ringed. I tried a couple of home hacks to see if it would work. I even replaced the AC adapter because that was an issue I had before with the Halo 3 one where I'd replaced that in the past. No luck. So that resulted in me having to track down a PS3 copy of not only this game, but also the next 3 games in the series that we're going to be talking about. The only one I couldn't find on PS3 was the Dark of the Moon game. And so I have actually recorded all of the footage for this game on this PlayStation 3 copy that I got. And I wrote a skit for the beginning of this video where I would show myself setting up these Xbox 360s, show both of them red ring on screen, and then call Caleb over at Flashing Blades to ask to borrow one of his 360s, only for him to turn me down, resulting in me purchasing the PS3 copy. And I hit the record button, and the Halo 3 Xbox 360 starts working again. For no reason. I have it on video. Okay, what the fuck is going on here? I had this whole skit written up because this thing was a brick and it red ringed, and this thing has not worked in about 5 years. And it's entirely too late now, so looks like we're sticking with the PS3 footage. However, I'm torn with the next video, the War for Cybertron video, if I want to do it on PS3 or 360, because now I guess I can go either way and it doesn't really matter. However, the Dark of the Moon game will have to be done on the 360 since that's the only copy of it I could find, and I really don't want to have to rebuy that for PS3 now if I don't have to, if I have a working 360 that will play the 360 version. So, with that story out of the way, I now own pretty much all of these games on 2 different platforms, including 3 different copies of Transformers Devastation, one for 360, Xbox One, and PS4. So, look forward to that, I guess. Overall, this is a better game than the film even deserved, and during an era where movie-based games were commonly laughed off as unplayable garbage. Not a hidden gem or a secret hidden classic, but definitely well worth revisiting. But for the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at a game that I am undeniably very passionate about, and one of the most beloved and well-respected pieces of Transformers media to come out in years. Till next time.
Some of you are probably no doubt disappointed that this video took so long to come out, and not for its production quality. It was literally just because of life getting in the way, but it released about 2 months after I wanted it to come out, and I'm not happy with that, and I'm sure some of you guys won't be happy with that either. But the next couple of videos I'm going to be working on with the channel are some of the most excited ones I've had in my backlog for a very, very long time. So between the Fist of the North Star Muso game, Gungrave Overdose, and Transformers War for Cybertron, these are going to be some of my favorite videos I've ever made coming up here soon, and that should be pretty self-evident with the amount of production quality that I put into them. But this one was kind of just a stepping stone to get to those. And I apologize that life got in the way. I had a major career change recently, and now that I have that all straightened out, I should have a more consistent schedule and should be able to work on things a lot more consistently from now on. In the meantime, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, I'll be uploading a lot more side content and behind-the-scenes content there, as well as cross-promoting the other 2 channels that I do. I'm doing a lot more Transformers content on the Zoids channel, which is a channel dedicated to model kits, and I do some Transformers toy reviews and stuff like that over there, and just talk about the series more in a unscripted manner. If you guys want more Transformers content and you're starved for how long these video essays take to come out. Also, I decided to open up a Blogspot account to start blogging about my first impressions / final thoughts about pieces of media that I consume, so I can kind of just write my stream of consciousness thoughts down about something that I wouldn't necessarily make a video about, even if it's like a novel or a comic book or something that I'm reading for historical reference or for philosophical or political reference to help understand the themes of a piece of media. And I think it's going to enhance the overall quality of video essays I plan to work on in the future. So if you guys want to follow me there, I will be posting to that whenever I finish a new piece of media, whether it be a game or a book or even another person's video from YouTube that really inspired me. And you can see all the details there in the little introduction post that I made. But thank you guys so much for watching yet again, and I will see you guys next time with War for Cybertron.